In a painstaking 2-year wait, we, fans of House of the Dragon, have learned that men can in fact listen. After a very slow, character-focused season 2, the people were confused as to why there were so few battles in a story that is notoriously called The Dance of the Dragons. Season 3 wastes no time dropping us right into the Battle of the Gullet. It's good to be back in Westeros, where we condone incest and brush over the fact that the CGI depicts wyvern instead of dragons. So, get ready to spend 8 weeks fangirling with me over this very hot cast, which I will mention likely every single episode right after this. Welcome back to Femme Furious. I am your host, Julia Rose Portella. A little bit of housekeeping before we dive into somewhere between a quickie and a slay by slay. I'm not really sure how this is going to go. So, first and foremost, I'm going on vacation. So, our schedule is going to be a little bit wonky. So, just bear with me. This is my first vacation, really, since I've started this podcast, and it's necessary. So, if you're here listening because you found me because you're looking up House of the Dragon, cool, great. Mostly we will be here on Tuesdays. However, next episode, which is episode 2, will come out the Friday after. So almost rounding up on episode 3 at that point. So here's our schedule. Tomorrow, there will be a bonus episode. It is a bisexual baddie draft because we had to get something pride related in here before the month ended. That will be with Capri Campo. If you follow her on Instagram or TikTok, she is the fairy bi mother. She posts a ton of bi content. And so we're doing a little bisexual baddie draft, and it was really fun, and it will be cute, and you'll enjoy it. So listen to that tomorrow. On Friday, we have Every Year After episodes 3, 4, and 5. And then next Tuesday, a week from today, Every Year After 6, 7, 8. We'll be closing that chapter. Goodbye to Barry's Bay, which we were in for a long while. The Friday after, so a week and a half from now, essentially, House of the Dragon episode 2. And then we will go back to a regular schedule where House of the Dragon will come out on Sundays, and I will be putting those episodes out on Tuesday. So that's our little housekeeping for right now. Thank you so much for being patient with me while I go away. I've had to re-navigate a lot of stuff to be able to ensure that I can actually just take some time off. So we condone self-care on this podcast. We condone self-care, and we also condone kissing your mom. I mean, 2 things that I feel like are necessary across the span of one's lifetime when we're here in Westeros on the podcast. So here's our chic peek for this episode of television. Spoiler warning. We're talking all things Game of Thrones. Sorry if you've never seen it. We're probably going to be talking about it. I'm also probably going to mention on occasion, when it feels appropriate, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. And then, of course, everything House of the Dragon, seasons 1 and 2, and anything from the book, Fire and Blood, which I really need to reread because there were some things that were slipping my mind about this episode of television that I could not remember if it happened that way in the book or didn't happen in the book. And I will be rereading the book before we dive into next episode. I just didn't have enough time because we've been hanging out in Barry's Bay, doing lots of other stuff, okay? Also, I'm gonna take a time out for right now. This is not normal content that I put out. I don't normally talk about reality TV, and I do not watch Love Island, which is why I don't talk about reality TV on this podcast. But if you like a reality type show and you like high stakes tension like you get in a Game of Thrones or House of the Dragons episode, you will love the book The Compound, which I just read and gobbled it up. I would say it's a cross between Love Island and a high stakes Survivor, but the concept of the book is about a reality television show. It's phenomenal. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes. I'll put a link to Fire and Blood too if you want to read the books. I'll put a link to Fire and Blood if you want to read that as well. And when you buy a book from my links, you are supporting the podcast. So thank you so much for doing that. Some of you have done that already, and I appreciate you greatly. We love books on this show. So let's dive into this episode. Episode title is Salt and Sea, Fire and Blood. It is written by Ryan Condal. It is directed by Lonnie Peristeer. Here's our vibe check for this episode. The House of the Dragon premiere brings us right back to Rhaenyra, the realm's delight, who is closer than ever to taking the throne, though her biggest enemy may be her own confidence, or perhaps it is just her son in the patriarchy. Who can say? Rhaena, on the other hand, has been fiending for a dragon since potentially the time she knew that she could have one. And she finally gets her moment and immediately then learns that you can't teach an old dragon new tricks. Alicent, who was ready to tap out of politics, finds herself having to outmaneuver everyone once again in order to keep her scheme in play, and finds herself playing the best way to play politics in Westeros if you are a woman, which is sex and manipulation. And for that, we love her. Meanwhile, Aegon is still technically king, but has major I won't quit, but they can fire me energy. Daemon continues marching towards his own predicted doom, but he looks very sexy doing it, and I am here for it. Corlys steals the episode and reminds everyone why he is one of the most formidable players in Westeros. Then, the long-awaited Battle of the Gullet finally brings action that fans have been waiting for. And finally, House of the Dragon is delivering us fire, chaos, and lots of emotional damage. Overall, we've got women who are strategizing, which we love, men who are self-destructing, which we also love, and dragons doing whatever the fuck they want, as is their right. And I feel that they should be able to do that. And Westeros remains one of the fictional worlds that I would loathe to be a part of, but absolutely love talking about. The feral factor, 8.5 out of 10. Who this episode is for: anyone who has ever looked at Aemond and thought, I can fix him, which I'm talking about myself. Anyone suffering from mommy issues, eldest daughters who are crumbling under the weight of carrying the entire family on their backs. And lastly, people who thought that therapy was expensive until they saw the Targaryen family budget. All right, let's dive into our quickie slay by slay type of deal. If you're new to this podcast and you've just found me through House of the Dragon, we will normally be going much deeper in these episodes. Will typically be a slay by slay, and we will be going beat by beat through the episode and pulling out all of our key feminist themes, history, cultural context, and more. However, giving you a little bit of a life update. This past week was my birthday, my sister's sweet 16, my other sister's high school graduation, Father's Day, and my grandma's 85th birthday. So we had a busy week at my house, and I was not home Sunday evening. So normally I will watch this on Sunday, watch it again on Monday, watch it again, and take all of my final notes, and then we will go through it. In case anyone is wondering how many times I watch an episode before we dive into a podcast episode, it's typically 3. But because it was such a busy week and because I'm going away, I just really didn't have the time to plug into this episode multiple times. And so this was a one and done watch for me. I will be watching it again. I will probably have notes and comments and things that I'm like, hey, we need to touch on this next week when we dive into episode 2. But for right now, this will be sort of a mix of my bullet point notes as I was going through and whatever might tickle our fancy as we go through this episode. So we'll mostly be going in chronological order. I have a real focus on just like the feminist things, but in future episodes, we will be going a little bit more into the Westerosi history. We'll be going a little bit more into the books. We'll be doing a lot more Easter eggs and pulling at theories and all that kind of stuff. So if you're new to this just by House of the Dragon, I would love to welcome you. Please stick around because I promise you we will be going much deeper in episodes in the future. But for right now, we're going to kind of do a mix of like a slay by slay and a quickie. It'll be somewhere in between. So let's dive into it. First of all, the theme song right away. Anytime I hear the Game of Thrones theme song, I'm like almost choked up. But if you notice, there is an addition to this particular version of the theme song. And now we have those like war drums that are underneath as it's going through, and we're weaving this tapestry, very bloody tapestry happening here. Lots and lots and lots of blood. And I think maybe because I didn't do a rewatch of seasons 1 and 2, which I will be doing while I'm on vacation this week, probably. I mean, it is just morbid looking at this tapestry as it is getting woven and all of the blood that is going through literally each and every single one of our characters. And it's not like we don't know what we're signing up for when we have a show like House of the Dragon, because we've already gone through Game of Thrones, where the plot point for Dany for her entire arc and trajectory is the fact that she has brought dragons back into this world. I mean, if you've just watched A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, that show takes place about 100 years after the events of this season of television, or this part of Westerosi history. And so by the time we get to that place, where even by the time we get to A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, where it's 100 years later, this talk of the dragons and like what dragons were and people that remember them and people that have never seen them before is such a huge part of not just Targaryen history, but like the history of Westeros and what that means for these characters. And so, like, going into the show, it's not like we don't know what we're signing up for, because by the time we get to A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and certainly by the time we get to, Game of Thrones, the fact that there are no dragons is a quintessential part of those stories. And so we're going through this season of television knowing that we are about to lose, right? All of these dragons, that these beasts, these fantastical creatures, these mystical beings that are so revered and that are such a status of power in this world, are about to go through a mass exodus and be extinct after this part of their history. So, it's great to kind of come back, but the tapestry, right away I was like, hey, hi, this is morbid. We are just looking at a Targaryen civil war that is leading to the death of all of these characters. Not necessarily the death of the Targaryen line, which we know obviously still exists, and yet, like, we do know that it is the end of an era where these dragons are about to be completely gone from this world and not brought back until Dany arrives and births her dragons, and becomes the mother of dragons. So really, really cool stuff to watch the tapestry and to hear the war drums underneath, and to know, like, we are at a chunk of the book which is notoriously really cool, actually. Like, it's a lot of battles after battle, but reading it does kind of feel a little bit like a history book, at least from what I can remember. Like, here we go, the dragons are dancing. And so the show is doing a lot of really cool things to make this part of the story much more interesting and much more character centered, because this is like a part of the story where you are introduced to a lot of people that you don't actually really care about, and who almost immediately die because they're in battle. We're at war at this point in the story. So, I thought the season premiere did a really good job of not necessarily reorienting us into the world, because it certainly just drops us right back in. People complained last season. They were like, what the hell was this slow ass season? Which I really liked season 2. So that's just on me. Like, I happen to like really character centered stuff. I'm more interested in that than maybe some of the bigger dragon battles. And mostly because the logistics of these dragon battles just don't particularly work for me. And that is true also for the Battle of the Gullet. But I did think that for the most part, they did a really good job of centering these different parts of the battle around characters that we care about, which the book, may breeze over in a line or two as it's going through all of the recounting of each and every battle. So we're definitely in a battle heavy season. Not to spoil anything for anybody like looking ahead, but going into this episode, I sort of knew what to expect from the Battle of the Gullet and the outcome of this particular battle. And I think how the story will approach these different battle heavy episodes, to which we will have many, I'm assuming, over the course of this season, is really giving us some runway to land into these characters in the way that the story seems to be reorienting from the text into the show. And remember, the book itself is a recollection of many different recountings of a particular story. And so it's this like really interesting commentary that George R. R. Martin is putting out about, you know, who gets to dictate history and the fact that multiple different people are going to orate or tell their story of history in different fashions. And so, like, in the thread of those different recountings is a semblance of truth, and yet, you know, very much like in the fashion of like the victor is the one that gets to tell the story. You know, what is actually true about this? And so the show has kind of said, like, hey, with this source material that is ambiguous at best about what has really happened, the show becomes canon about the story that is actually unfolding. And George was a part of that through line. And so I think this is like a really cool way to also reorient us into this story from the source material, which you could brush past these battles and be like, cool, here are the bullet points and like the spark notes of what has happened in this particular battle, and not necessarily have an emotional reaction to it. It can be almost quite clinical in the way that you can approach it. And I think that the show is doing a really good job of giving us a lot of connection to these characters as we're going through. And so we sort of open in this place where we're with Rhaena. We're with this character who has canonically had no power and been sort of unimportant, and has been, much like Aemond, struggling to find her place in this world. And we know that, you know, Aemond claimed that power by bonding with Vhagar, which at one point could have potentially been Rhaena's dragon. Instead, Rhaena ends up in this position where she is able to claim Sheep Stealer. You know, Rhaena is a character who has spent her entire life feeling lesser than other Targaryens. She, unlike the other Targaryens, has no dragon, has no special role, and is perhaps a little overshadowed by those that are around her, especially her sister Baela. So, and this is not an intentional thing on Baela's end, but it is what is happening in their like family dynamic. And so this is a critical moment because it's touching on a lot of different things that the show is trying to get at, right? Number one, Sheep Stealer isn't a cradle dragon. It's not a dragon that's sort of like born into the family and has been a part of the Targaryen line for many years. He isn't a part of this royal system. He is a wild dragon, and he even kind of has this wild look about him. Like, if you look at the design of Sheep Stealer, he looks very similar to the Iron Throne. There's something almost menacing, or like menacing is the word that I'll go with, about him. Like, when I see the Iron Throne, I'm like, that thing is impressive, yet I don't want to be sitting on that. That looks like you could get hurt. He's very pointy. He's got a lot of spikes. He's wild. And I think that there's something really critical about talking, you know, about the fact that he is a wild animal, because if you've ever seen any sort of story where there is a wild animal at play and somebody tries to quote unquote break that animal in, we learn through that animal, right, that like you can't do that. And so sure, Rhaena is not necessarily being given power and she is taking it. And I think that that is important in a family like the Targaryens, or in a world like Westeros that is constantly telling women that they must inherit their authority through their fathers or their husbands or these institutions that are set up around them. But Rhaena takes this moment and rejects that in the face of this bonding with Sheep Stealer. And so her dragon chooses her, sort of again ambiguously. Like, we don't really know if that is what's happening until he brings her back some sheep. And, you know, nothing says bonding with your dragon like eating his regurgitated dead sheep that he has charred and then sort of half-heartedly tossed your way, and then watches you to make sure that you're eating it. So I don't know if anyone's ever seen How to Train Your Dragon. Okay. But there's a point in How to Train Your Dragon where Toothless throws up a fish and then like kind of nudges it towards Hiccup, and he's like waiting for him to eat it, and Hiccup is like and does and eats it, and it's so like rancid and gross, like you could just tell it's like a viscerally disgusting moment. So she's got this moment where they bond over this sheep that they're eating together, and her dragon, Sheep Stealer, ultimately chooses her because she pursues him herself. And this is a conscious decision that these two beings are making together. It goes back to this lesson that Viserys keeps trying to put onto Rhaenyra when they are younger, when she is younger, that the Valyrians don't actually control dragons, and that this concept of controlling these beasts, giving them power, is not truthful in its entirety. And it's one of the things that makes Viserys like such an interesting character in season 1, because he's one of the characters that is not solely dependent on the proximity to dragons as this price of power. And Rhaena, unfortunately, is learning this lesson firsthand. Sheep Stealer is not a pet. He is a force of nature, a wild animal with no battle training, and has never been in a situation like this before. And so like this irony of the fact that she has spent years wanting a dragon, wanting to be important, and has the right intentions, by the time she is flying home to Dragonstone, that she sees the Battle of the Gullet happening and thinks to herself that she can go and make a difference now that she has a dragon that she's been bonded with for like less than a day, right? And so like her heart is in the right place, and yet this is a dragon who, much like any other wild animal that we would ever see in a situation where there is a sense of danger and they are running off of instinct, feels threatened and ends up harming the Valyrian fleet, and ends up essentially putting Jace in the position where he is killed by the end of this episode, and Vermax as well. There's something really poetic in this storytelling, the poetic justice of this moment of Viserys's lesson coming back into play, that these animals control us and we don't control them. And we see Rhaena just trying multiple times in the Battle of the Gullet to get Sheep Stealer to obey her. And we see the other dragons responding to Sheep Stealer and recognizing that Rhaena is on this dragon. And so, like, they don't want to harm this dragon either. And it changes the way that they would strategize about another dragon being thrown into battle. And so it's like a really interesting combination of things. And yet I think the fact that she claims Sheep Stealer at all is really, really cool stuff, even if it does ultimately end up to a lot of larger destruction in this part of the battle by the time that she gets to the Battle of the Gullets. So let's leave Team Black for a second and head to the Greens. Larys is one of the messiest and most entertaining people in Westeros. I'm not saying I like him. I'm just saying that we knew he was a little bit different. He's got a foot fetish. I don't actually think that that's uncommon at this point anymore, but I think a lot of people are much more open about their foot fetishes. And, you do you. We're not here to judge, because in like 2 or 3 scenes, we're about to talk about incest, and I'm maybe potentially, by the time we get there, going to say some stuff that will be out in the world that I can never take back. But who knows? I don't know where I'm going to go with that. Larys remains one of the most entertaining people, and much like a Littlefinger character, is just so deeply loyal to his own agenda, and that makes him just a fascinating character to watch. In fact, I wish that there was like a little bit more of him in this episode. And so he wakes Aegon up. He's like, you know what, Aegon? We need to get the fuck out of here. Let's steal some gold. Aegon the Magnanimous, with your, 2 strands of hair, I think we should be on the lam. Every time that this man is cornered, he finds another angle. And again, he is able to survive through manipulation. And so he immediately turns Aegon in and then immediately uses that information to his benefit, where he's like, you can't kill us. You could kill those guys back there. They're not important, but you can't kill us. I'm his advisor. That's the king. And if you kill us, you're really going to piss off your queen. So you probably just want to take us captive, because now it's giving him some time to strategize and figure out whatever his next move is going to be. And so while Aegon is technically still king, Larys is arguably the one that is keeping the green cause alive in this particular moment, specifically when Aegon defies this man and decides that he is not going to bend the knee and pledge his allegiance, true or not, to Rhaenyra. And that brings us then back to the Blacks, where we have essentially a small council meeting where Rhaenyra addresses to the room, to her present council, that Alicent has come and has struck up a deal with her that so long as Alicent and Helena and Jaehaera are able to walk away from this, Alicent's good. She's like, you know what? Let the boys be boys. A son for a son, an eye for an eye. And I am happy to just walk away so long as me, my daughter, and my granddaughter are good and golden. Let me just take my girly pops. We're going to make sure that we're all safe. And then you take the boys. Have at them. You want them to be dragon meat? You go for it. Incinerate them. Who the fuck cares? As long as I can get out of this coup, essentially, that I started and walk away with all of the girls in my lineage, fine by me. You know what I have to say to that, Alicent Hightower? Is you go, girl. Keep the women alive. And I don't think that there's anything more that we can expect from a character like Alicent at that point, other than like, yeah, that's a good plan. Of course, this is incredibly tragic because she's being sincere at this point, after all of the scheming, after recognizing that maybe she was wrong about what has happened with the death of Viserys and what he was saying, and this entire coup in the way that she has completely undercut Rhaenyra's reign, is this fact that she is sincere. She's ready to be done with this war. She realizes that this is not a war that people are going to survive, and this is not a war that people are going to walk away kindly from. And so she decides that if I just give it up now, I'm preserving as much life as possible. On the opposite side, on Team Black, is this completely tragic story of Rhaenyra, who can't see past her own agenda here, her own hope to get her birthright back, essentially. And so she sees no logic. She will hear nobody's complaints or faults in this plan. She just is ready to steamroll her way through it. And you know what? That is her right as a queen. And just so you're aware, I am a huge supporter of women's rights and wrongs on this podcast. So I think that there is something really quite profound about the fact that she is a character who her whole life has had to fight against the stigma of what her femininity means from season one, from the time she's a child. And we have this really sad scene where she can't listen to her advisors because she has this hope of getting back to the place that she wants to be at. And yet, like, Jace is trying to talk her out of this plan to go and take the throne. And then essentially uses like backward ass logic to have Sir Lawrence lock her in a room, because essentially he is there to protect the queen from any threats. And right now the queen is a threat to herself. And what is the point of these battles, and what is the point of this war if not for Rhaenyra to be alive at the end of it to take the throne? And at this point, it's partly that for Rhaenyra, but also when Jace addresses this with her, she's like, if I die, good thing you'll be safe and you'll be here, and this will be your birthright, and you'll take over the throne, and you'll be a wonderful ruler. Like, there is this power dynamic that exists that's like mother and child, and like a mother wanting the best thing for her child. And there is this like opposite power dynamic of like masculine and feminine, essentially, where Jace is a boy, he's 16 years old, and has this power to talk, bro code to Sir Laurent, to have her locked into this room with Mysaria. Like, it's just so incredible how these like different power dynamic works. And it doesn't matter that Jace is technically, quote unquote, trying to do the right thing. There is also something in Jace that wants to prove himself worthy of this cause when he has done so much work on behalf of Rhaenyra and has been dying to get out onto the front lines. And Rhaenyra, as his mother and as his queen, has denied him again and again because she's trying to keep her line safe. So there is this like interesting power dynamic that kind of goes back and forth, and we kind of see them play with it. And then like ultimately this woman who has been fighting the patriarchy her entire life, who has been fighting against the system her entire life, who has been denying her femininity in so many ways because it's just not who she is, ultimately finds herself in this position to once again be at the hands of the patriarchy, and there's nothing that she can do about it. And it's this ultimate betrayal, and it doesn't really matter whether Jace is doing it partially altruistically, but partially because he feels he has something to prove. And of course, the tragedy of his story is that by feeling like he has something to prove because Rhaenyra has not maybe let the leash go long enough for Jace, is that he's never been into a battle before with his dragon. And so he's at this place where he should never be as low to the ships as he is, to be able to be snared by these scorpions. And so like everyone here has something to gain, everyone here has obviously something to lose. And the tragedy is that perhaps if Rhaenyra had gone, she would not have made such a mistake. But then who knows, because we have Rhaena, who comes in with sheep stealer and completely throws off the dynamic of what is happening with the dragon part of the battle. And so like it's hard to say, when you're at war, obviously there are so many factors that go into play with these different characters. And yet this scene where Sir Laurent obeys Jace and locks Rhaenyra in against her wishes and refuses to let her out feels like such an overriding of her autonomy in so many ways. Even more sad is the fact that the two women who are the center posts of these different stories, right, in Rhaenyra and Alicent, have made actually a rational political calculation and have used their history together to come to this conclusion and stop the bloodshed and stop the war. And yet, because Aegon has abdicated the throne, and now Aemon, who is much more bloodthirsty and has been literally undercutting his brother and his mother at every opportunity in order to grab whatever power he can for himself, is such a tale of like what Westeros is, right? That these men, whether it's Daemon, whether it's Aemond, or spanning into like Game of Thrones territory, even pick your man, that they are repeatedly derailing the plans of women who have created actually like rational, logical, political decisions and calculations and have come to like conclusions that would actually be best for everybody, and completely dismantles them through their pride and their ego and violence, essentially. What is so, dismaying about the situation between Rhaenyra and Alicent is not only that Rhaenyra is played then by the patriarchy in her son and in Sir Laurent and in like the structure of the patriarchy as a system, but also that by the time that Rhaenyra is making a plan, she's operating on information that is already outdated. And to Alicent's dismay, Aemond is not a character that is so easy to control. And so the way that she is going to have to manipulate the situation completely changes, and we'll see that in just a short little bit. So let's go to Daemon, who is in the Riverlands. And so Daemon, bloody, problematic, love him. Seeing Matt Smith with like all of the blood on his face. Just a 12 out of 10 for me. Very hot. I have no notes. I genuinely love it. Everyone in this cast is hot. Like, I love Olivia Cook. I love Emma Darcy. I really don't foresee us going through these 8 weeks without me talking about how hot everyone is every single episode. But seeing Bloody Damon actually made me realize that I probably need therapy a little bit, and texted my friends in my group chat and was like, is there something wrong with me that I'm attracted to this? Because I am a pacifist, just putting this out there. I'm a pacifist through and through. Real life violence, don't have time for it. Fictional violence, totally fine. Seeing a morally gray man like Daemon, bloody and fighting for his queen, what could be better? And this is where Daemon is the most comfortable. Like, Daemon is a good military person. He is a good military commander. He's a skilled fighter. And like, we've seen him in this role multiple times, like, come to victory. And so like, he's doing what he does best, essentially. And so the image of like the river lords literally butchering a lion that we had seen last season with Jason, who now has his head cut off and tossed to us by the Starks in the north. It's great. So we love it. I'm sorry, I just said the Starks, but I meant the Winter Wolves. So the Winter Wolves pull up to the Riverlands where Daemon and crew are fighting. Okay. And this is where Lord Roderick Dustin pulls up and is holding the head of Jason Lannister. So if you are like, who was that and why was this important and who was that person? It is Tywin's twin brother. So Jason and Tywin Lannister. Tywin Lannister, we will talk about in a little bit, who is literally on a fleet with the Triarchy and Lohar. So we've got people kind of like all over, but yeah. So the Winter Wolves pull up. They have killed Jason Lannister, and that's where we are with Daemon. So we get kind of like a quick hello to our guy Daemon doing what he does best, killing people. And now these two forces have joined together. Just as a reminder, Jace is the one who got the Winter Wolves to come and join the fight. So the Winter Wolves are now here to join Daemon and crew, and they will move on ground to the next battle. We then cut to kind of like Criston Cole and his crew, and we see right away that there is a village woman who has been raped at the campsite of the Greens, where Criston Cole is Lord Commander. And we have this really interesting conversation where Sir Gwain's punishment is due, yes, but also a statement to the men that we are not beasts, but knights and soldiers of honor, which is something to like really ruminate on, especially after coming from a show like A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which came out earlier this year and like sort of reoriented us back into Westeros in like a really different type of way, especially a more intimate type of way, in a way that's honestly like way more enjoyable for somebody like me. I really love A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. So if you're interested in that, by the way, I did a whole episode on the feminism of that season of television with a wonderful, incredible human and also someone in my family. Her name is Alex Stamson. And I'll tag that in the show notes so you can listen to that if you're interested in it. And so like one of the things that we talk about on that episode of the podcast is the fact that a show like A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a show that is about integrity and what it is to be a knight. And if we're so quick to abandon our morals and our ethics and our integrity, then what is the point of this vow? And if we don't live by the oath that we are taking, then why are we taking it to begin with? And so like the show really examines that, and I love A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms for that, because it's getting at all of the rich shit that I love to talk about when it comes to storytelling. So we have a character like Sir Gawain who's saying like, we are not beasts, but knights and soldiers of honor, and taking this vow seriously and having this conversation with Criston Cole, who has time and time again used moral authority to manipulate other people, despite the fact that he is not living in alignment with the moral codes of somebody who's commander of the Knight's Guard, right? Commander of the King's Guard, hand of the king, right? And so, like, he says, we will all become beasts in the end. And he has been so traumatized, shell-shocked, really, by the events of season 2, where he has witnessed dragon battle up front, up close and personal, and has come to the conclusion, correctly so, that there is no surviving this. And in fact, like, in season 2 is like, death would be kind of a relief at this point, if we're being honest, because he knows that this is just long-winded to get to the same destination, which is, we could be as skilled as we want. There really isn't a point when one dragon can come overhead and incinerate us all. And Kristen Cole, not a dummy, is realizing, again in real time after that battle, that the Greens simply do not possess enough dragons to override the dragon battles and the dance of the dragons that is going to unfold. At the end of the day, you can grow your foot army to be this large, formidable thing, and if all it takes is 1 or 2 dragons, and the Greens don't have enough dragons to be able to fight back or defend, Kristen Cole is like, we're all marching towards a slow death right here, or maybe a fast death, if we're being honest, if it's coming from Dragonmouth. And so, like, yeah, Aemon has Vhagar, pretty big win for the Greens, as far as, like, that's a pretty fucking big dragon, but the Blacks outweigh the Greens in, like, numbers of dragons alone significantly. And so the fact that he's like, we will all become beasts in the end, and is so checked out from what this all even means. Like, his whole idea of what his purpose in all of this will be has completely shifted, and I think it's making him far more interesting than he's been in seasons prior. He's been highly dislikable through a lot of season 1 and most of season 2. In fact, all of season 2. And so, like, by the time we get here where he's just painting his sigil onto a shield, doing something that's so mundane and so grounding for his character, I think is telling us exactly where this character is, even though we don't really spend a lot of time with him in this episode. But this conversation is so critical and interesting, right? That this conversation is coming about women being raped amongst the camp, which, like, whatever. Through history, we know this is just like a thing that happens, and is like, again, something interesting that Alex Stamson and I talked about on our podcast when we talked about A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which is like, if you could create a fantasy world and anything could be happening in it, and like you still choose to include rape and you still choose to include the patriarchy and all of these different power dynamics, then like, what are we doing? And like, why is it fantasy? Like, what are we fantasizing about? And this leads into a larger conversation, which is like, what is George R.R. Martin trying to get at? Which really, if you know George R.R. Martin, the story of A Game of Thrones and the story of now A Night of the Seven Kingdoms and House of the Dragon and all of these different stories that are building out this larger Game of Thrones, Westerosi universe and history and lore, is his own interest in history. I mean, every time I watch Game of Thrones, or, it's been a while since I've like gone through the entirety of Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones is really just derived from the War of Roses, which history is confusing. This idea that like people did share the same names, people did pass down these names, right? Like, how many King Louis were there? And so there is like a lot of like historical accuracy, and I think that George R.R. Martin is aiming for a lot of that amongst his stories. And yet we have this like brushing over of this moment of a woman being raped. We don't see it, but we understand that that's what's happened, and we understand it even more because then Sir Gawain says something to Kristen Cole about it. He's like, you're the Lord Commander, like, you need to do something. And so like the fact that we have characters like Sir Gawain who are rooted in this, Dunk or Brienne or, whatever type of character who like take these oaths seriously or want to live into the moral, codes that go into a role like being on the King's Guard and takes it seriously, clearly takes it, seriously. And yet Kristen Cole is so far from this because of his trauma, essentially. And so, like, when he says, like, we all become beasts in the end, he's basically, not to say condoning rape, but it's just like, well, we're all going to give in to the beast eventually. To which Sir Gawain says, only if we abandon our moral principles, to which we know that Kristen Cole has abandoned his years ago. Years ago, from the time that he was Rhaenyra's guard, he has abandoned his principles around what it means to be in this role. And yet, there is something in this battle, this metaphor of rape and the rape of a woman and a village woman and like the small folk essentially, and standing up for the small folk and for the women and for the defenseless, right? Like the concept of this oath that they take, right, which we get in A Song of Ice and Fire, and in the Game of Thrones adaptation somewhere in the TV show. We definitely get it in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, where we hear the actual oath, right? Which is, in the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. And in the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and the innocent. And so we have characters like Sir Gawain who are like, okay, check, brave. We're doing it. We're marching into battle. Okay, check, just. I'm being fair. But like this concept of the name of the mother, something feminine, protect the woman, protect the mother, defend the young and the innocent. And here she is, a woman, a small folk of the village that they are occupying at this particular moment in time, has been raped. And so we must, as knights, as the King's Guard, defend the young and the innocent. And Kristen Cole, like, can't be bothered. And so there is this like larger metaphor too of like, well, what does this actually mean for these characters taking that oath into a larger sense? And what does it mean that Kristen Cole like really doesn't buy into it at this point? Like can't even use like the false sense of propriety and his own manipulation of the moral codes to get what he wants or to get other people to do what he wants. And the fact that he is like completely stalemating it altogether is really interesting, and I'm excited to see where Kristen Cole goes with this. And so we go from this conversation about justice for the innocent and for the small folk and for the women to this conversation with Ulf and Adam on the Isle of Faces. I almost just said the Isle of Skye. So Ulf, right, ends up telling us how he was sexually abused by a priest in Essos. And so we go from like the rape of a woman to like, hey, hello, the priest in Essos, the patriarchy. Here it is, priest raping little boys or priest, sexually abusing little boys. Nothing has changed. It's just our world, but in Westeros. And it just goes to show that patriarchal systems don't just hurt women. They hurt men. They hurt everyone who is beneath the power of institutions. Because he had Targaryen blood, we know that he was in some sort of blood ritual with this priest in Essos to a certain capacity, which just reminded me of Varys, and knowing that Varys ends up a eunuch and wondering if there is something ambiguous about Varys's background, which we don't really get a lot on, and it's ambiguous on purpose. And he's bald, which makes me think of Egg, who shaved his head so that people would not see his blonde Targaryen hair. If like part of that ritual that Ulf is talking about is something that is like superimposed, in the future to Varys, who also talks about sexual exploitation in the church. And so then we cut back kind of to Alicent, who is writing a letter, planning coup number 2, and has her daughter Helena there. and uses Helena's words where Helena exposes that Aemond is afraid, uses those words to then spit them back to Aemond to strike the fear deeper. So number one, last season, Aemond essentially was like, Mom, fuck off. We don't need you anymore. And took away her power, what very little power that she had in the rooms that she had them in. Aemond knew this would hurt Alicent. And so Alicent, number one, pulls at that thread knowing that Aemond loves her and will be hurt that she is hurt by something if she is using that to her advantage. But then she uses it is well to be afraid. She takes this idea of what Helena has said to her and uses it back against Aemond to further her agenda to get him to go to fucking Harrenhal because she needs him to get the fuck out of there so that Rhaenyra can come in and take the goddamn throne. I mean, what Alicent does here is really smart. Listen, women in Westeros have to wield psychological influence and honestly sexual prowess on occasion because they lack access to direct military power. And, the perk is that she tells him that he's courageous. The pitfall is that she's like, it's good to be afraid, in which I would say, like, you are undermining a man's ego there. Baby, do not stroke it that way. And the frame of the shot before they kiss was so chilling to me because it looked that way. And I was like, surely we've done incest in every direction. I mean, last year we had Daemon fucking his mom in a drug-induced dream by Alice. So, like, I'm not really sure why my brain was like, they're not going to go there in this way. And yet they did. And there is something deeply wrong with me because I just think Ewan Mitchell is so hot and so is Olivia Cook. So of course I'm like, kiss, 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 kiss. But then there is something like really chilling about, what are the power plays that are happening here? What are the, dynamics that are happening here? And so they framed the shot as like this really romantic way, like the way that they're standing in front of the fireplace, the way that they're sort of backlit by this light, the way that Aemond is sort of a foot taller, than Alicent, and poor Alicent has been sexually objectified for her entire fucking life. Her father, Otto Hightower, has completely told her to use her feminine wiles to get in the good graces of Viserys, and then ends up married as a young woman to this incredibly older man, and not just married to him, but having his children. She is, playing foot games with Larys. She's got this thing going on with Kristen Cole. Like, she has been so sexually objectified over the course of her whole life and has been used by so many people to further her own agenda, but to further other people's agenda too, particularly Otto Hightower, or she's like used this to her advantage to keep her safe. And so you see this like single tear going down her cheek, and I didn't know if that was because Aemond actually took it to the level of kissing her, or if she was like sort of pulling at tears beforehand to like drive her point home that she was afraid for Aemond. And it's probably like a mix of the two of those things. I didn't see the tear until after, so I'm not really sure when it came about. But after the episode on HBO, Olivia Cook, who plays Alicent, says, we wanted the kiss to feel like Aemond was not quite confident with it, and for it to feel like a first kiss from his side. I think Alicent has always thought there's something more malignant with the feelings that Aemond has towards his mother, but didn't ever think they would manifest. She's completely left dumbfounded and fearful for what that means. And this is true. I mean, I was unsure of what Aemond's agenda is here. We know that Aemond is pro-incest. He was like so down for Helena. He was actually like, Aegon, you're an idiot for treating Helena this way. You should be treating her well. He tries to run away with Helena last season, has these feelings clearly towards Helena as well. He has done some interesting things with breast milk, and who could blame him? And yet, I'm sorry, it's been a long day. And yet, I think he also, to a certain degree, is doing this as a power play. And so while he certainly has mommy issues, and we know that he has wanted the affection and attention of his mother and has never been able to get it because he's not the firstborn son, boo hoo, and he's not the only daughter, boo hoo. Sort of carves his own path and becomes very hard to the world. Sexy as he is, with his, singular eye patch and his little scar down his face, I just think that there is something in him that really maybe is feeling these feelings and is ready to take it to fruition in all of the feelings that he is experiencing in what his mother is confessing to him and manipulating him with at this point. And whether he knows it's a manipulation or not, like, takes this opportunity to maybe take what he wants, or maybe just to assert power over Allison in the way that he can in this particular moment, because he realizes that she is asserting power over him in the way that she can in this moment. And so, like, I don't know to the extent of what's going on here, but I think that potentially all of those different power dynamics could be at play here, on top of maybe some unresolved feelings and a deep need for therapy when it comes to this particular man. We've got Alice on, the Isle of Faces, who is like, I'm a witch. And for that, I love her. This was just iconic to me. It's also like such a testament to what is going on in these different roles in this universe. Alice sort of exists outside of the traditional feminine roles that are existing within most of the stories that we tend to hear, even though Westeros has a lot of witchy kind of context going on. She's not somebody's wife. She's not a queen. She's not a mother. She is just somebody who has knowledge and therefore has power. I drink and I know things. She's not necessarily drinking, but this line of like, I'm a witch, was iconic, and I thought it was great. And I'm excited to spend more time with our girl Alice in episodes to come. She has spent a lot of time with Daemon, where I think by the time we see her with Ulf and crew on the Isle of Faces, that she is definitively Team Black, which I don't know if that was a question or not, but I kind of could not remember where her allegiance actually laid coming into this season based off of what happened in the TV series last season, which was 2 years ago. Sue me. I publish 2 podcast episodes a week. I am in a constant content spin. I wish that I could have rewatched all of House of the Dragon. I will be watching it on vacation while I'm flying. I'll be able to get most of it done by the time we get to next episode of the podcast. So I said that this was going to be a quickie episode. I'm sorry, this is turning into a slay by slay. And so, like, thus we enter the Ballad of the Gullet. We have Jace sort of running off into battle. He asks Bela, his betrothed, to come with him. Bela is sort of like, I think you should let the queen out, my stepmother out. I don't think this is a good idea. I think you should change your mind about this. But she does end up going and running off with Jace. Jace locking his mother up, having her essentially committed the way that men can do. And then we have this like wonderful line from Rhaenyra where she says, I never asked to be protected. I expect it from my council, those craven men ever clutching at their doublets, but my queen's guard, my own son, I may appear to have the weak and feeble body of a woman, but I possess the heart and spirit of a king. I mean, nothing summarizes the complete overriding of her autonomy and the fact that this is an act of gender, essentially, driving her to just take a knife over and over again to this dress, knowing that if she just had a penis, that all of these people would be behind her and bloodied and rallying. But at the end of the day, Jace is making a decision on her behalf, completely overriding her autonomy, which I know we talked about. And that is exactly what is wrong with the patriarchy in Westeros and in today. Go anywhere in the world, if the patriarchy is active, which guess what? It this is what is happening in the world. Men think they know better than us, and they don't. You know, there's always this excuse that men have to do things on behalf of women. There's like always an excuse. And so, like, for Jace, it's like, well, I'm keeping her safe. Like, what's the point if she dies in battle? And then, like, what is the point of all of this if she doesn't end up on the Iron Throne? Like, there's always an excuse that men have to do things on behalf of women. But if given a say, the woman in question would make a different choice, then you are not doing something on her behalf, baby. You are doing something for your own agenda and what you think is right, and you think that your knowledge or desire or wants or experiences or whatever is more valuable and important and should be honored over a woman. Anyway, so just touching on this again quickly. I know I talked about all of this at the top, but I just want to talk about what they said in the after the episode. So Emma, who plays Rhaenyra, says to have your agency denied is a maddening experience. It's control in the guise of protection. She knows this is gendered. She knows that her warrior spirit will be heralded were she male. Pretty fucking cool. So now we go sort of into the Battle of the Gullet. Okay, hi, hello. We have Lohar, who is a savage fucking badass with a sexy ass voice. Like, my cousin has two pit bulls, and if anyone's ever been around a pit bull at all, ever in the entirety of the world, they think that they're lap dogs, except they're so heavy. So when they jump up on you or they try to sit on you, it's like, it can be a lot. And so my cousin is always like, get down. And I think it's very funny. And this was really some good stuff to me in the way that she deepens her voice, but also like an interesting choice in femininity. Speaking of things about the patriarchy, that like as she's commanding her ship, like deepens her voice to a near masculine type of tone to command leadership on her ships, which I thought was really interesting. Really good line in the show, Tyland going to Lohar saying like, you'll be glad of our armor when the fighting starts, and Lohar is like, I know that I will, to ultimately then have him thrown overboard and sink and drown because he is wearing this armor and can't get out of it fast enough, and it's heavy, and it's, you know, now filling with water and you're sinking to the bottom of the ocean, and like that's it. Really, 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 really good stuff. As far as like the ships go, we now have on the black side, we have Corlys, who has created this beautiful masthead in his fleet on the ship that he has named the Queen That Never Was, after his late wife, who died last season. This ship, the Queen That Never Was, has a masthead of Rhaenys and her huge tits. So that was an eyesight that I paused on and was like, LOL, took a picture and sent it in my group chat to my friends. I was like, who made this? Clearly a man. Not just like in the show, like a man, but like clearly a man made this. It was giving me the vibes of like, if you've ever seen a statue of a woman and her breasts are just like copper, like bright and shiny, when like the rest of her is like brassed over, is like, yeah, because people can't help but like touch the breasts of statues, which is like just how women are perpetually sexualized even in statue form, which is disgusting. And so yeah, it was giving me similar vibes of that. So we don't really know the fate of Corlys at this point, okay? We do know that Corlys finally got through to Alan, or seemingly got through to Alan. I thought the fight between Lohar and Corlys and like Alan and whatnot was maybe the most interesting pieces of the Battle of the Gullet. The dragon stuff, sort of as cool as it maybe visually looks, is like really hard to follow. And so like I really love the fact that Lohar knows Corlys well enough to know that the burning of High Tide would distract him. And so even though he navigates the crossing of the narrow sea, and we're seeing him make this incredible journey through, and also knowing Lohar well enough to know that she's going to follow his fleet through this passage that is really difficult to get through, that he knows that he can navigate, but that he knows that she cannot navigate. And so they get out safely, and it is ultimately his demise, that she knows him so well, to see that Driftmark is burning. And so they sort of ram through his ship. I think Corlys is still alive at the end of this episode, but it's supposed to be unsure. Alan, who also is unsure of this, ends up killing Lohar in like this really nice sense of poetic justice in honor of the father, right? So it sort of like continues the lore of his somewhat complicated relationship with Corlys. Like, Alan's a really boring character, in my opinion, but the fact that he kills Lohard seems like the most interesting thing that he's done since we've met him. And then, of course, we have, Sheep Stealer kind of coming in with Rhaena, fucking up the whole day, which ultimately leads to Vermax, who evades death once and then ultimately gets pulled down in the end. And you think that maybe Jace is able to walk away from this battle as Jace is unhooking himself from Vermax, who is slowly bleeding out in the water and falling to his death. And then he's shot by 3 arrows and, ultimately does not survive. And so, this tragedy of like going into his first battle and losing significantly his life and a dragon. And the dragons aren't just weapons, they're symbols of the Targaryens. It's a reason why the Targaryens are often saying they are the dragon. They believe themselves to be one with this species, and that the dragons are putting them at like the hand of God, if not gods themselves. And so every dragon death, essentially, or everyone that is a part of the Targaryen line, aka Jace, is another piece of the dynasty that is dying alongside of them, which we have seen in this super morbid tapestry in the beginning at the theme song. And so now we have the loss of Vermax on the side of the Blacks, and we have also the loss of Prince Jacaerys, who has died as his brother Luke did, which was on dragonback, lost to the sea in service to his mother, in which he loved so deeply. And there is surely to be emotional fallout, particularly for Rhaenyra, in the episodes to come over this. Okay, for your feminist follow through, I'm giving you more reading material. One of the books that I recommend out to people all of the freaking time, I have been recommending it out in my spiritual work in like at least once a month in a tarot reading or an astrology reading. I will recommend that people read a book by therapist Nedra Tawwab. It is called Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Guess what? There's also a workbook. I will tag all of it in the show notes. The reason why I'm picking this in particular is because, number one, all of these women need boundaries, okay? The book is really great because it's broken down into different types of relationships. And so you do not need to read this book cover to cover. You can just put it on your shelf and like grab it when you need it, and it will give you some really solid, tangible action steps in order for you to be able to navigate those relationships with more efficacy and with better boundaries. Also, by getting this book, not only are you supporting the podcast, but you will be supporting a Black woman creator, author, therapist, social worker. Like Nedra Tawwab does it all. I'm no longer on Instagram or not actively using it right now. But you can go and follow her on Instagram. She has some really good content out there. She has some other really incredible books. But I will say that Set Boundaries, Find Peace is a book I return to often. I've got lots and lots of notes in the margins in those books. I've printed out some of her Instagram posts and put them into that book when I've needed to be like, hey, by the way, don't forget this piece of information. And she has stuff on Headspace. Like, she has stuff all over the place, and she will really help you transform a lot of your relationships if you use her work. And so for like an Allison Hightower who needs to like tell her son no, like no means no and stop means stop. Please don't kiss me. I'm your mother. Or for, you know, Rhaenyra, who has a son who does not want to commit incest, but does sort of want to commit his mother to an asylum, or at least to solitary or somewhat solitary confinement, because she is confined with, you know, Viserys, which is like, it's great. Like, at least you have a fuck buddy in there. But on a very serious note, you know, set boundaries, find peace, will be able to help you with those relationships, whether it's parent child, whether it's with your partner, whether it's with your friends, whether it's at work. It's a really great book and it's a great resource and a great tool. So that is your feminist follow through for today. All right, let's crack open the burn book where we will look at the superlatives for this episode. The Bold and Bothered Award. This award is strictly for the Femme and the Furious. And it goes to Rhaenyra, slicing the dress over and over and over again, cutting this piece of her femininity literally away from herself, or making this grand statement about femininity in this world that is so like deeply rooted in the patriarchy. The Shiro Award. This award goes to the baddie who is the most inspiring, or the moment that is the most empowering, and it goes to Baela, who saves Jace and Vermax the first time that they are sort of hooked and trapped, knowing what Jace and Vermax's fate would be. Thought that this was surely it for them. I was getting really depressed that we were going to lose them so early into the battle, and then Baela kind of comes through. And so for like book readers, that was a wink and a nod, and ultimately it does become his downfall. The Femme Fatale Award, you know, for the most smashed the patriarchy moment of the episode, and I think it goes to Alicent, who sends a message as Aemond Targaryen. And we love this. We love a coup. We love a coup part 2. Speak Your Truth trophy, best quote or line. One king is as good as another. Really telling stuff. It really gives you a sense of like, doesn't matter if it's Aegon on the throne, doesn't matter if it's Aemon on the throne. It's very much like in the story of Dunk and Egg, in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. There is this quote where she says like, I've never known a joust to change the price of eggs. It's just like, one king is as good as another is just like so telling about where the small folk are in this like larger tapestry, so to speak, of Westeros at this moment in time. And then honorary heartthrob, because I'm just a girl, okay, and I want to talk about the most swoon-worthy moments, and like genuinely, sorry, I'm not going to shut up about it. Anytime that you give me Daemon Targaryen covered in blood, I think I'm going to be slightly turned on. And I realize that you all probably think I need therapy, but I know that there are people that are listening to this that are like, girl, I get it. And for that, I love you. And if it's you, send me an email. We can fangirl together, femandfuriouspod@gmail.com. So thank you all for listening to this episode of Femme and Furious. I love you all. If you like this episode, share it out with your friends. Please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And I will be back tomorrow with the bisexual baddie draft. And until then, don't kiss your mom.